Welcome in Rose City to Soccer Made in Portland. Back here after a couple weeks off, attending.
Just 1 week off?
Well,
give us credit. Just 1 week off.
2 weeks. 2 weeks since the last episode, at least.
Yeah, we were on international break.
Yeah, aka I went to a wedding and also had some other stuff going on. So congrats to my friends Fabian and Kendall for getting hitched last weekend in Fallbrook, California. It was an excellent affair with no cell service on Saturday. So
nice opportunity to unplug.
Yeah, it was nice to unplug. Missed that most recent Timbers game, but we will talk about that as Mr. Reifer did take that one in, along with the other two games that the Timbers have played since we last recorded a podcast. That's 2 wins and a draw for the Timbers. What feels like somewhat of a turnaround is being billed as sort of them starting to turn it around. But interesting to break down, I guess, the opponents, to break down what has happened within the confines of each of those matches. And maybe we just start with the most recent one, Chris, that Houston game, 2-2 against Houston Dynamo. So I'm wondering your impressions from that game, and then we can, I guess, work our way back through the 2 wins preceding it.
Fun game, first of all. I mean, in terms of entertainment and quality, it was a pretty fun game to watch. Both teams certainly had moments. The Timbers had I mean, in many ways, it was kind of like a lot of Timbers games that we've seen this year, where they certainly had moments and spells of play where they looked pretty compelling and they were a lot of fun, and they were attacking with verve and were really effective. And they conceded multiple goals. And I mean, the maxim proves true, where if you concede multiple goals, you're probably not going to win. And they conceded multiple goals and they didn't win. So, I mean, in many ways, I think it was like a number of the games during that awful winless stretch, in which if you kind of watch the game, you'd see this team at times and be like, these guys look pretty solid. They look good. They've got some real attacking quality in particular, and can even sort of get on top of a game for a stretch. And they did get on top of that game for a couple stretches. But then you look at the scoreline at the end, and that's a pretty familiar ultimate result. And so, I think it's that is, I think in some respects that slows the roll, coming off the, winning 3 of the preceding 4 coming into that game. That slows that a little bit. Because frankly, when you look at that kind of a game, Houston's a team that's kind of in mid-table in the West. I think they're in like 7th or 8th or something like that at this point. That a home game against a team that's mid-table, if you assume that the Timbers more or less need to average about 1.5 points per game in the second half, which is what history suggests, in order to, have a confident playoff spot. If you start from that assumption, you kind of circle games like that, mid-table opponents at home, and say, those are ones that you got to win with regularity.
Yeah, it sort of is the sort of game that tilts the season one direction or the other.
Totally.
Because obviously the top tier teams are the challenge, and then the lower tier teams are the must wins. Then you have that sort of middle area that you're talking about.
And that's the kind of game that if you're not winning that kind of game with regularity, where are the points going to come from? Because you're not going to be able to play San Jose and Kansas City at home every week. In fact, you're not going to be able to play them at home again. You only get those ones once. Those, by the way, being the co-worst teams in the league on points per game right now. And in the stretch of 5 games in which the Timbers have 3 wins, that's 2 of them, right? Two of their wins are home wins against the worst teams in the league. And so, you're not going to get those kinds of games all the time. You're going to need to win with regularity games like the Houston game, and they didn't because, once again, they gave up multiple goals, and they sort of like us, they took a 1-week vacation from conceding multiple goals, but also like us, they're back. And that's not going to be good enough. If they're giving up multiple goals with frequency, they're not going to, it's going to be they're going to finish this season about where they are, around 1.1 points per game, or maybe worse. And that's not going to be good enough, right? That's going to get people fired. That's gonna get people, people's extensions or options not picked up. That's going to get people transferred and traded and waived and all of those things if that's the way it goes. And so, I think it is easy and right to look at stretches of the performance against Houston and say pretty good. In some ways, you can squint and look at that game and say, oh, maybe the Timbers were a little bit unlucky not to win it. I think you can make the countervailing argument for Houston that they were also unlucky not to win it. They put one in the back of the net that was called off correctly for a close offside. And they took 2 leads. So, Houston could make the argument that they were unlucky not to win it, which generally leads to the conclusion that it was a pretty fair draw. Timbers also put a couple off the crossbar light on that could have been winners. So the opportunities were there for both. But my overall point is just that if you're not winning that game, it's hard to see where the wins are going to come from, at least in a sufficient number to salvage much of anything from the season.
And those 2 preceding games, obviously, they did take care of business. They got the win over Austin, which I think
win over Austin's the best win of the season.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I think it was probably their best win of the season. Complete performance, a
first
shutout.
First clean sheet of the season.
First clean, which is crazy.
Yeah, 16th game. You'd like that not to be your first clean sheet of the season. Yeah. But hey, we'll celebrate the fact that they showed up to the party at all, not decry the fact that they're late.
Yeah, they're very late to that party. Midway through the season to get your first shutout, that's rough. But I think it is indicative, obviously, of the issues that we've talked about this team facing before on the back line in particular. Nice to see that little 2-game stretch. Obviously, that Houston game being a sort of reversion, not a complete one. I think I looking at the highlights since I didn't watch that game in its entirety, it didn't seem like it was sort of as open and as difficult. And maybe you could speak more to this as someone that watched it in its entirety. Didn't seem as open or as bleedy as some of those other games have been for them, where they give up
more
multiple.
Along the lines of the game had real ebbs and flows. Okay. Houston came out of the locker room in both halves and dominated things pretty well. They deserved both goals. Both goals were deserved from the run of play. In the first 10 minutes of the game or so, the Timbers were really under it. Houston had a number of chances, had a number of corners, and the Timbers were really under it. And I thought the Timbers again were pretty flat coming out of the half as well. And Houston got a goal in the 50-somethingth minute. And so I think there were also the reactions to that. Starting in the 70th minute or so with the subs, the Timbers started to press the initiative. Similarly, in the second half, starting about halfway through the first half, the Timbers really started to sort of tilt the field in their favor. And credit to them for those things. Credit to them for sticking in a game that they fell behind a couple times. That's good stuff. But we've seen good stuff through a lot of this year. I mean, it's not like a lot of the performances during that winless streak were just totally bleak. There were some that were. But there were a lot that weren't just totally bleak and awful. They scored multiple goals in a number of those games, famously. And yet they weren't winning. And I think that is the concern this week, that the couple games away may have been more like going to a wedding where you have no cell service and coming back than a meaningful, lasting change that's going to put them on better footing for the second half of the season. And that's the question now. They go to a St. Louis team that's been struggling, but also a team that's one of those teams closely behind them in the table, that if they were to go to St. Louis and lose, I mean, you're at the point of the season where you're starting to count those points. And that would be an awfully big swing if they were to go to St. Louis and lose. On the flip side, if they go to St. Louis and win, you're starting to count those points. and that would be a pretty meaningful win. But in terms of whether the better results from the last few weeks is indicative of a team that's ready to make a second half run. I think the jury is very much out. Maybe there's some reasons. I think there are some reasons that you can latch on to try to make the case that they are. But there are at least as good reasons to be doubtful of it. And we'll see.
Yeah, we will. And I think that one thing that has been notable over the last couple of weeks and over the last several games is Phil Neville's willingness to turn certain dials and press certain buttons and see what might work to alleviate some of those issues at the back. And one of them that I thought was interesting was Kamal Miller not playing an essential role as he is normally, but as a left back, which is a compelling change and an interesting one. And I think one that against Austin, I believe they utilized it against Austin and it worked. If I'm not mistaken, I do remember it from the SKC game as something that they toyed with, but that's one piece. And then I think that Dario Zuparic being back in there centrally on a more regular basis seems to have steadied the ship in some ways, personnel wise and tactical approach wise. Just looking at what they've done defensively over the last few games, what stood out to you?
I mean, I still don't. Okay. So I'll note the things that I noted that I thought were a little bit better. Frankly, against Houston, I thought they had periods in which they pressed better, probably than at any other point of the season, where they were just more cohesive and more directive in terms of their pressing. Houston's a team that really likes to have the ball. They perhaps, aside from Columbus, as much as any team in the league, they want to unbalance opponents with the ball. And there were definitely times where where the Dynamo were on top of the Timbers in terms of, and were controlling the game with the ball. But I also thought the Timbers had some real stretches of that game where they really unsettled the Dynamo and they disrupted their buildup and they had some good moments there and some good stretches there. And so, I think that was a positive. In terms of whether there's been a real shift in terms of the team's identity over the course of the last few weeks, I don't know if I would go that far. Yes, they've made some personnel shifts. I think there's a better than even chance that the Miller at left back experience has largely been just because of availability stuff, and they think that's a better option than the other Miller, Eric, at left back when Claudio Bravo isn't fully available. I think he probably will be back fully available going forward. And so query whether, what they do. Obviously, Kamal Miller is going to be out on an international duty for the next couple of weeks. And so, I mean, that's a question as to how they proceed there. But I don't know that I've seen a ton in terms of, the emergence of a really clear defensive identity from this team over this last stretch, which frankly is part of why I'm a little bit guarded about whether these are truly lasting changes or whether we're going to, sort of see kind of a reversion of the same. I don't think this is a team that has a clear tactical identity. It's one of my sort of fundamental criticisms of this team 17 games now into the Phil Neville era. Is that I don't think they have a clear identity. I think they've got some talent, especially in the attack. But I don't see a ton of structure. I don't see a ton of a consistent identity. And I think that's going to be a challenge going forward that's going to lead to some inconsistency unless they are now starting to establish it. But if they are, it's early days.
One thing that has started to sort of trickle into my mind at this point, and we're still a few weeks away from it, is the summer transfer window. The idea of what, if anything, they will do to either shore up some areas of need or, strengthen ones that already have plenty of talent, like strengthen the attacking area, which, to their credit, has been one of the best goal scoring units in MLS this year, despite all of the up and down struggles.
Evander's legit, man.
Yeah, Evander is a legit star. He's an MVP
is the emergence
candidate.
Of Evander that we were saying before the season was necessary for this team to be good.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he has been I'm not going to say he's been MVP quality because like Leo Messi exists.
I think he should be a candidate for sure.
But I mean, like, is he in sort of that second tier? Yeah, he's been that good. The numbers are that good. That he's been at that level, frankly, that is, you know, that's what the Timbers paid $10 million for. And he's performing like that level of player. And so, yeah, I mean, I think Jonathan Rodriguez, I think, frankly, has played pretty well overall. There have been some periods in which he's struggled a little bit, but there have been periods in which he's been really good. Felipe Moore has been phenomenal for them. Has really benefited from Rodriguez and Evander and their excellence around him, and Moore has been tremendous in that respect. They've got contributions, albeit inconsistent ones, from guys like Anthony, from guys like Santi Moreno, although he's in a bit of a slump right now that I think I think there are questions about whether he will stay through the transfer window. In terms of, I think it's a really tricky transfer window, candidly, for the Timbers. I mean, first of all, there are major questions about sort of roster structure going forward. If they go with that third full DP under the new rules, that's going to result in a handcuffing in terms of many of their other assets, including about $2 million in GAN that they would lose the opportunity to have. I don't think they're going to go that route.
Yeah, they could go the Marco Royce route and just give him sponsorship deals. And,
yeah.
And it's funny that they're openly doing that, the Galaxy, because there are other teams that are like wink, wink doing that. So it's interesting now that people are sort of doing it unabashedly. But that's a side note. And I don't think the Timbers are going to do anything like that.
They have the muscle to do that. I don't think they have the capacity.
No.
I mean, they're not in a market that's conducive to that, and they frankly haven't built their brand well enough to do that. What is the marketing value? So I think there are those questions about whether that's going to be a sort of how they're gonna sort of structure the roster going forward. I think there are questions as Jerry enters the chat. He has these questions as well. I think there are real questions about whether throwing more resources at the back. They threw a lot of resources at the back line this last winter. And I mean, I really question whether it's a personnel problem in back or whether it's an overall sort of structure and tactical problem, an organization problem. And so I'm not sure throwing more money at the back line. I mean, Kamal Miller's a good defender, right? I mean,
I think Miguel Araujo.
You've got two full international for like halfway decent international squads.
Yeah.
And back, you've got Dario Zuparic, who has been on good defenses in Portland before. You've got Zach McGraw, who, although he's fallen out of favor and seemingly is either sort of battling back from I think it was the head injury that he had earlier this year, if I'm remembering that right, and it's been it's had a little bit of a tail on it, which has certainly happened before. Or if it's just a matter of he's not rated as highly as those other guys by Neville. Zach McGraw has been a successful player in Portland before. I mean, you look at that center back unit, it's not the worst. I don't know if I would say it's a strength, but it's not a worst in MLS quality central defense unit.
No, and they came into the year.
Room, Phil Neville, I think, sort of absurdly called them the best goalkeeper room in MLS. Let's slow the roll a little bit. But look, I mean,
hey, he called Evander the best number 10 in MLS, and there's a guy that has a pretty good argument plays for a different team.
Increasingly, like we get like one or two just like really funny overstated takes from Phil Neville's post-game press conferences where, you know, if it was on like pardon the interruption, like the other person would be like, whoa.
Yeah, Kornheiser would say something and Wilbon would just have a problem with it. I'm a person that enjoys a good superlative though, so yeah, I don't necessarily mind it, but it is funny. Yeah, go off.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if it becomes a tradition of like Phil's hot take of the presser, like I'm good with that. We can have some fun with that. But you know, I mean, he called him the best goalkeeper room in MLS. I would slow my roll a little bit, but Max Crepeau came in with, I mean, as one of the better goalkeepers in MLS over the course of the last few years. And I think James Pantemis has been pretty good. So, you know, I mean, would I say that they're the best goalkeeper room in MLS? I would not. Would I say that they've at least got the tools to be pretty good? Yeah, I would. In terms of fullbacks, I mean, you know, again, I think there are criticisms to be had of both Claudio Bravo and Juan Mosquera, and there are questions to be asked about the depth behind those guys at that position. But am I looking at that group being like, not competitive in this league? No. I mean, it's a flawed unit, but it's not awful. And so, you know, I'm a little bit doubtful that it's a matter of just needing to throw more resources at the back line. And then I think the questions in central midfield are just a lot murkier long term. Oh,
yeah, long term is something that is worth thinking about, because I think everybody has been caught in this, you know, and rightfully so, this sort of like stasis of like, oh well, you know, we're okay there because we have Chara, we have Christian Paredes, we've got Eric, who, you know, gets his opportunities here and there these days, like compared to those two guys. But, you know, those are like the three main, you know, sort of central defensive midfield type players. You could bring a younger designated player in to be sort of the heir to Chara's throne type of situation easily.
Aren't they looking at David Ayala for that right now, though?
That's the thing.
And hasn't he actually been starting to perform a little bit there?
He's been really good, and Neville does not stop talking about him. That's the other thing.
Like sometimes they really like sometimes a little bit backhandedly, but other times full of praise. But I mean, that I think it's just a hard unit to figure out sort of both the short and long term plan for. Because you've got Diego Chara, who I think there are very fair points to be made, has over the course of the last 18 months or so taken a step back. It's 38 years old. Like, duh, obviously. Like that's inevitable. It's frankly manifestly overdue at this point. But nonetheless, I think it's fair to say he's taken a step back. You've got Ayala, who's had some good performances, but hasn't really put it together and hasn't put together a lengthy period of health and form. You've got Christian Paredes, who probably being one of the Timbers' most consistent and consistently progressing performers over the course of the last 4 years that he's been in Portland, having maybe his first really major step back season. I think it's been a really, really rough one, up and down one for Paredes, who I think has struggled to figure out his role in this team. I mean, he's got company in that respect, but like, yeah, I think he's struggled. Eric Williamson, I think, you know, at the beginning of the season, I was really skeptical that he really had a clear role in a central midfield that also featured Evander, and I think that take has held up pretty well. And frankly, he's a player who the Timbers just aren't maximizing his quality.
Yeah, so I wish for him he was in a situation where he could be in honestly more of a like, you know, central like attacking role, like something that like utilize, like you think about that first game against Colorado, that might not be a good bellwether for anything related to this Timbers season, but you look at how he played in that game when Evander was hurt and when he was able to be in more of a role like that. Like, obviously, if you're Portland, you want to hang on to as many talented players as possible. But for Eric's sake, like, I wish the opportunity was there for him to shine. And it doesn't seem like it is for him with Evander, you know, in that number 10 area. So
I mean, but like this issue wasn't unforeseeable. And I mean, which is to say, I think there are a lot of decisions that need to be made with this group. Can those decisions be made and implemented in a summer transfer window in the middle of a season? Seems kind of hard. And even then, are you making decisions? I mean, how are you going to assess what kind of pathway you want for Ayala in making those decisions? I think that's a really hard decision to make right now. Are you going to commit to his future? I don't know if I would be willing to go all in, but I definitely wouldn't be feeling like I want to cut cord. Like it's one that I would kind of like to see play out a little bit longer to make that decision. In terms of Diego Chara, is he going to continue to be an every game starter? I think you could make an argument that he's not, or at least shouldn't be. But is he just fully out of the rotation? No, I think there's still quality there. And so, I mean, it's just that, frankly, is the area that I think stands the most to be reformed and upgraded, so to speak, to use a loaded term from Timbers history. But I just think those decisions are a lot more complicated than can be really easily made over the course of a single transfer window.
Yeah, and I think
and
that
certainly
they've
one
spent,
midseason.
No, for sure. And I think that they've spent so much money over the last couple of windows to a point where they've filled out the roster in the way that they're sort of gonna fill it out. And it seems more likely than not. And, part of this is because we haven't seen any, reporting or anything like that. It'd be nice if there was more reporting on the Timbers and Thorns. It'd be nice if there was people regularly covering that team and the Thorns on a more regular basis. But I do want to give credit to
those who do.
Tyson and Shane, who've been doing a great job through the I-5 corridor and had their work posted through the Oregonian as well. Them along with all the other folks that continue to cover that team and those teams, doing a great job. I do wish there was more. But the point being, there hasn't been a lot in the way of rumors. There hasn't been a lot in the way of reporting for them sort of hyping up something that's coming down the road. Usually the Timbers like to have sort of a long road through the insiders like Tom Bogert and others to showcase the work that they're doing. And that hasn't happened yet. So it seems less and less likely that they're going to make those type of moves, and more likely that they're going to press on with the roster that they have. Now, how does that roster come together? How do they continue to capitalize on this, like, embers of a potential turnaround that we're seeing over these last few weeks? That's the storyline to follow as the midseason sort of wraps up and it heads into the home stretch.
There's one more option, though. And it's one that some folks around the league have at least speculated about, which is going out and spending money on another attacking piece and just all gas, no brakes. Like,
that'd be fun. Look, Anthony was good at the start of the year, but he's not really been a world beater as of late. I will say that against Austin, he was tremendous. He was really good and showcased his potential there. But the other wing, it's been Jonathan Rodriguez, but you don't have to have him there. You can have him up top still. I think he's been better as a winger, but you can still play with what he's done. Go get a striker. I mean, Felipe Mora has been great the last 2 years.
I think Felipe Mora has been great. I really throw cold water on this idea. I think it's a bad idea. Look, I mean, it's not like a big galaxy brain to take. Like, look at this team. Problem ain't scoring goals. Like, that's not the issue.
They're one of the best in the league. They still are one of the best in the league in terms of goals scored.
And if you're going to spend huge money to upgrade that spot, are you really going to get a lot better? I mean,
Antoine Griezmann, I don't know.
If you still struggle to defend, is that going to really make a huge difference in points? And you're going to handcuff the roster for years going forward? Are you a good playoff team if you can't defend? The answer decidedly is no. Defense wins in the playoffs. Period. Like, if you can't defend, if you can't manage game states, you're dead. Like, you're meat. It's over before it starts in the playoffs. And so like, you just can't 7 seconds or less suns it in the MLS playoffs, or basically in any playoff format in any sport. If you can't defend, you can't win. And so, like, that move seems like it would be like, I get why the neutrals want that, right? Because that's just like, let's go.
Yeah, throw it all at the wall.
Appointment viewing, like, let's do it. I think it would make very little sense. And if you're not going to go for that, full senior DP, big money spend that they tried to do this last winter and didn't quite hit on, although I think Jonathan Rodriguez has justified his signing. If they're not going to do that, and if they're going to go for sort of like a TAM level guy or maybe a young DP, are you really going to improve upon what they have there?
Yeah, like if they go crazy and go after Bertarame again, like that'd be a different conversation. That'd be like, okay, like F it, like let's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that signing makes a ton of sense now, given the other personnel, but
Rodriguez, yeah, but even then, like it'd be crazy. It'd be like the most they've. I mean, it already is the most they've spent in a calendar year, but it would be like a just gargantuan. It'd be like all the money that Merritt Paulson got for selling the Thorns, he just invested in like DPs for the
which just screams like money burning a hole in your pocket, like where you got money and you just like you went and you blew it all on candy. Like,
well, it's like when your credit cards are like pretty low and you want to like go out and just spend a little more. That's sort of where they're at. or maybe the check cleared and you're feeling good. But who knows? I don't think that they will make a move this summer. Just from the outside,
I think they have to though.
Because
here's the thing. Like,
conversation, like what is it? And
I think they have to for bad reasons. Or at least they will for bad reasons. I mean, if you're Phil Neville, how do you talk about the first half of the season if you can't say, hey, we needed to make some changes to the roster? Like, how do you explain it? And so, like, I think they're going to do something. I just think what they do is pretty unclear. I think the kinds of moves that they probably need to make are not the kinds of moves that are easy to make in a summer transfer window. And I think it's a little bit of an uncomfortable window for them. But I think they got to do something. Because if you're going into that window saying, now we feel good with this group that we got, then you got a lot of questions to answer about the first 17 games.
Yeah, and you can answer them in the final 17. That's the other thing.
You can answer them in the final 17, but you better.
Yeah, but you like
literally
if you
don't,
have to.
Then you got nothing.
Yeah, then somebody's seat becomes too warm.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of nowhere else to point the finger at that point. And so I think they're gonna do something. I mean, it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting and very telling to see what they do. But I think it's a tricky window for them.
The Thorns have not played much since we last recorded a podcast. The international break allowed for a little breather from that action and for folks to tune into the U.S. Playing South Korea a couple times. Fun
excited
couple
for the
of
start
games
of the
there.
Hayes era. I think there's good movement in the right direction. I don't think it's going to happen immediately. I still have relatively low-ish expectations for the Olympics, but good positive directional movement for the women's national team
for sure. And I like what I saw in those couple of games. I mean, they were playing Korea, but it is what it is.
And if you can figure out that Mallory Swanson, Sophia Smith, Katarina Macario front line, or excuse me, Trinity Rodman with Macario underneath them front line, that front four, if you can figure out how to make it work, that's going to be spicy
for sure.
If they can get that moving, and I think Hayes has got the technical news to do it, and so I'm pretty excited about that. But the unit that we saw in that first Korea game, I think, was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. And
a little bit of an aside, but
no, it is. But it's relevant, and especially to our pal Soph, who did not play in that game against Orlando, which we previewed on the last podcast. Haven't had a chance to talk about yet. It was tough to not have her for the Thorns for sure, especially when we're talking about frontline talent. Barbara Banda is a monster. She's one of the best players I've seen, period, in this league or any other league.
We were
She's
expecting
phenomenal.
to get 180 minutes of two monsters going at it, and we got 45 minutes of one.
Of one winning the game for her team and just being a force.
She was great, but honestly, like, that was kind of my takeaway from the game was, this is going to be like a massive heavyweight fight, and it turned out not to be that because Soph didn't play at all.
Yeah,
and they came off at halftime with a knock. And that was just unfortunate. Credit to the Thorns for sort of sticking in the game and not just writing it off at halftime. It would have been easy to do, and Sophia Smith is just that important to them. They're not going to go to Orlando and win without Soph. She's just too important to them. You can't take
especially
an MVP
in a game
level
like
player.
That.
Yeah, you can't take an MVP level player off a team like that. Go to a team as good and as hot as the Pride are, and expect to get a result. It's just going to happen extremely rarely. And so, I mean, I think you see the 2-1 there, and you kind of say, all right, that wasn't the game that we were hoping it was going to be. It wasn't a terrible performance. It's not a devastating result. Like, move on to the next, which happens to be against a team that's given the Thorns historically a lot of trouble. The North Carolina Courage at home. Pride night at Providence Park. That'll be fun.
Heck yeah, love it. And 2-1, yes, I think is I think it's a segmented game, right? Because Banda came off at halftime due to injury. Before that, you watch her out there. She is so physical and she is so fast. She's bigger than Soph is, but it's
movement's really good too.
It's the same type of movement. It's the same type of physicality that she has. Yeah, she is everything that you want in a striker. And man, she, Soph is great. This is a pro Sophia Smith, like praise her to no end sort of podcast, but like Banda is the MVP right now, and it's gonna take Soph tearing it up down the stretch of the season.
Let's not lose our heads. I think Banda and Soph have the potential to be a Sosa McGuire type MVP race.
It could be totally
in NWSL this year. I think those two players are both on another level from anybody else in the league. And I think that's got the possibility of being like sort of an MVP race that will reflect or be sort of could be a similar dynamic to just two sluggers just smashing bombs in the NL Central. And that'll be fun. That's really fun. And I really wanted to see that on the field a couple weeks ago, and we didn't get it. We'll get another shot at it. So
yeah, there'll be another shot at it this regular season in Portland. So circle that one on your freaking calendars. That's 1 week after my wedding, so I don't think I'll be making that one. Also, it's the day before the Ohio State versus Oregon football game, which of course is my day job.
That's true,
covering the Oregon Ducks. So, but yeah, that's a big one in the regular season. I do have a feeling, given the way these two teams are playing, that there might be a little postseason meeting in order. Long way to go before that.
Could be a
long way, but
long way to go. A lot of things to happen.
See that. I would love to see it in the championship, just to tickle the fancy of NWSL fans everywhere.
I mean, put two teams as good as those two teams and two players and as good as those two players on any field on any day. That's appointment viewing.
It's good for the league too, honestly, to have those type of stars to promote. But yeah, Courage are next for the Thorns. Pride night at Providence Park on Saturday, and then after that, headed up north to Seattle to play the Reign on the 16th at Lumen Field. Important to sort of get back into the rhythm for the Thorns, I think, in these next couple of games. You don't want to backslide because of that Orlando result. I don't think it's the type of result that could send them into a backslide. But hey, look, they won 6 freaking games in a row before that. And if you can get back on that winning track and continue to build upon what you built in those preceding 6 games, with everybody back from international break in varying levels, I am sure, of availability, it'll be interesting to see. I'm excited for those couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You can pretty easily throw away that game at Orlando and not worry too much about that result and that performance, as long as it doesn't turn into multiple, right? And so that's the trick.
And I also think that, just as an aside and a point that I didn't finish making earlier was that the second half with Banda off the field, when things were even, I think that the Thorns showcased what everybody has liked about them over the last several games, and that they are, highly competitive. Izzy DeQuilla scoring the goal was great, but beyond that, I think that, both ends of the field, they showcased a resilience and a sort of togetherness as a team, that prior to Rob Gale taking over seemed like it was on shaky ground, and now it seems extremely solid. It seems that despite, the occasional injury or lack of availability here or there for key players, that they're able to put it together and sort of reform that Thorns identity that everybody's gotten to know over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think they both showed that they are teams that are solid in their structures, that are good overall teams that both have superlative stars. And so, I mean, in many ways, it was a disappointment not to see it, but it sort of just whets the palate to see it again. Of when you have both of these teams being good, solid teams with superlative stars, seeing them, in their full form. Interesting. I'll tune in. I recommend, other people do too. You might not be able to. But yeah, I recommend it.
I'll be at the NCAA Track and Field Championships this week. So
fun.
That's going to be fun. An athlete to watch and one that I look forward to watching is Jada Ross, the thrower for Oregon. Just broke her own NCAA record, throwing that thing 20 meters. First woman in collegiate history to go over 20 meters. Seventh woman in American history. She's a beast, and so it's been fun to watch her. She'll be in that and the discus, and then Oregon's got like 15 other female athletes that are going to be competing. Yeah, the Oregon women are very good. There's a few Oregon men that'll be there, but the Oregon women have a chance to win a team national championship this weekend. So that'll be fun to keep an eye on Hayward Field for all of that action. I'll be covering that, and we'll be talking about it on future Ducks Confidential podcasts, along with the other podcasts that we have on our network. As part of your Ducks beat,
do you also get to mosey on down to the Olympic trials?
I will be down at the Olympic trials, yes. So that will be fun.
Nice.
Jada Ross is one of the people from the Ducks that will have chance to compete there, along with others, plenty of others from this national championship meet, who will have a chance to go to the Olympics for the U.S. A lot of international talent in this national championship as well. But yeah, it's going to be cool over the next couple of weeks for fans of track and field, for diehard running heads, as some may be, to get down there and check those events out. So it'll be a lot of fun for sure. And then obviously, our other podcasts, make sure you're on there. Oregonian Sports, Ducks Confidential, Beaver Banter, the whole enchilada that we've got available.
Blazers draft is coming up.
Blazers draft is coming up.
Most exciting day of the Blazers season for the last several years.
The Donovan Klingon era is on the horizon, ladies and gents. So follow us on Twitter at SoccerMaidenPDX, at Chris Reifer, at Ryan T. Clark. We'll be back as soon as we can to chat more Timbers and Thorns. Thanks for joining us.